Congressman, how are you?
It's great to be here. And quite frankly, there is a lot to discuss, whether it's impeachment, whether it's budgets, where it's government shutdown. I mean, we could talk for hours. And thank you for having me on. And thank you for us getting back together and fighting a good fight.
It's good. Let's go there. You were one of the first that I heard after your election. You started talking about the possibility of impeachment quite early. Some suggested, is this too early to talk about impeachment? But here we are some months later, and a lot of folks are talking about it, and there's an official inquiry going on. Tell us what you know about the state of affairs in D.C. with regard to impeachment.
Yeah, so two things, on your first point. The reason why I went ahead, so I issued articles of impeachment, updated articles of impeachment, and part of that was because of the timing, because I knew that we would, if we delayed it, it would put the impeachment and it would kind of overlay on the spending fight. And it would listen, I am wholeheartedly for impeachment. I offered articles of impeachment. I told leadership that when we got back from August, that if you didn't have a path for impeachment, I would lay down a privileged motion and that I was going to force a vote. I mean, it was that simple. We have wasted enough time. The evidence is there. I've seen it. This is beyond reproach. It's incredible. The amount of the millions of dollars. It's up to like $22 million. If you and I took a fraction of that, couple hundred. If some sheik or oligarch in Eastern Europe wired you $200,000 and you didn't have a pretty darn good explanation for it, the FBI is going to pick you up at 4 a.m.
That's right?
No question. The Bidens. Now, this gun charge, that they're finally laying on Hunter Biden, I think that's timing. But no. So now back to your original question of how does it move forward? You're going to have this inquiry. You've got 3 investigations that are moving currently in oversight and judiciary, and Jason Smith has one as well. And so what'll happen is there's going to be another committee set up, and they will start laying before the House of Representatives, thus the American people, all of the evidence they have. And I do believe it will culminate in a vote. Now, currently, there are a few members of the Republican Party that are hedging and saying, I haven't seen enough evidence. Well, let me tell you, you're about to see the evidence, and it's going to be overwhelming.
So I find it interesting. You bring up the gun charges that Hunter Biden had in front of him yesterday. I find it interesting that the one issue that Hunter Biden is facing of a criminal nature that you cannot tie to Joe Biden, they've indicted him on. And the rest of the issues they've remained silent on. I just find that interesting. I don't know if it's a head fake or not. I don't know if they hope that this puts the issue to bed. I mean, they tried to pull one over on the American people with this 2-tier justice system, and it did not work. And we owe that judge in the case a lot of credit for smelling a rat, because they were trying to give Hunter Biden complete and total immunity for any future crimes, right?
That's right. Yeah, and again, kudos to the judge. I also think that the judge realized that if that were to be done, that their career would be over, because again, it was so blatant. But again, if anyone listening on the radio right now were to take some of the pictures that Hunter Biden had taken and they were released to the public, the drugs, the crack pipes, all the other stuff.
Guns, all that.
Again, the DEA, everybody would be knocking on your door. They'd be talking to your neighbors. And then here we go. Years later, they finally get around to doing something. But that's because the conservatives on this side of the aisle, people like you, have been sounding the alarm like, what the heck is going on here?
It occurs to me that poor Andy Ogles takes a Christmas card photo with his family, and he's got a gun in his hands. And the mainstream media acted like you killed, a bunch of puppies. And Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, there's like hundreds of pictures of him naked with guns all over the internet, and they don't say a word about it. They act like they don't exist.
Well, again, double standards.
Double standards. That's right.
Different levels of justice depending on who you are, and that's a problem. Look, justice, I don't care if you're a liberal, a conservative, somewhere in between, justice has to be blind. That's the basis and the foundation of our country, that you and I are going to be treated equally, especially before the eyes of the court. And the moment that changes, it's a dangerous place. And look, you can like Trump, You can dislike Trump, but the fact that woke district attorneys are weaponizing their office to go after a particular individual, plug in a name. It doesn't have to be Trump. The moment that is allowed in this country, we're in trouble. That type of persecution and jail time didn't work in Rome when political parties or political operatives disagreed and you were going to suffer jail time or worse. Didn't work in Rome. It didn't work in the British Empire. It's not going to work here. We have to have a level set playing field, and it's important that we impeach Joe Biden.
I'm talking to my current congressional representative in the 5th District of Tennessee. My previous representative out in Alabama was Gary Palmer, who's a great guy, policy chair for the Republican Party. And Gary told me one time, I was yelling at him about something or another. And he goes, Matt, you're of the mistaken belief that just because there's a lot of Republicans in Washington, D.C., there are a lot of conservatives in Washington, D.C. There are far more Republicans than there are conservatives. You had to deal with that to a certain degree with regard to the selection of a speaker.
That's right.
And, Kevin McCarthy is not as conservative as you. Not as conservative as many of the representatives in the state of Tennessee, but he is a Republican. How would you assess his performance thus far?
Well, so if you go back to the speaker's fight, and let's start there. For me, it was never about Kevin McCarthy. I really didn't know the man. It wouldn't have been fair for me to come in with any kind of prejudgment based off of rumors or anything, right? So he had a clean slate with me. But that being said, it was about the rules of how the House of Representatives operates. And I always liken it to a children's game. Whether it's Monopoly or red light, green light, the rules of the game can determine the outcome. And what had happened in Congress over the last 20 or so years, the rules had been stacked in such a way that I, as a rank and file member, meaning I'm not in leadership, I'm not a chair of committee, I'm not in one of those power seats, I did not have the ability to offer an amendment on the House floor. I couldn't cut the budget. And so what I fought for was the ability to just go do my job. And so as a freshman member of Congress, last count, I've passed more amendments than any other freshman. I've passed more amendments than many members of Congress. I've sponsored and co-sponsored more legislation than most members of Congress. Why? I have a job to do. Look, it's broken, and we're not going to fix it by sitting on the sidelines. So now, going back to your original question of his performance, we set in those negotiations spending caps. We've blown through those caps. We're above that level.
Yep.
We negotiated Limit, Save, Grow, which had upfront save. That was the debt ceiling fight of that package that we initially negotiated, and we knew it was going to change when it came back from the Senate. But it had upfront cuts for the American people. What we got was the Financial Responsibility Act. I call it the Financial Irresponsibility Act, but the savings aren't realized for a decade, and they're based off of targets, not actual caps.
Right.
So in other words, the numbers, the math that's in there only works if Congress sticks to the plan.
Right. And it's all back end. It's loaded on the back end, and it never happens.
Right. It's Common Core math. It's not real. It doesn't make sense. And then the REINS Act, which is regulatory reform, nerdy stuff, right? None of that's come to fruition. So now you see Matt Gaetz talking about a motion to vacate. Any one member can do it. They walk down to the well and they issue the motion to vacate, and it triggers a vote on the speaker. And so
did you like McCarthy's response to that?
That was, so you're talking about his response was like, well, just, he drops the F-bomb and do it, right?
Yeah.
And,
stop talking about it, just blank and do it.
I texted with him afterwards, and I told him I thought that was a mistake. But that was coming from a place of emotion. I think it's a reflection of the tension that is in Congress right now. Look, we're going to have a government shutdown. Let me just go ahead and tell you right now, the government's going to shut down probably for about 2 weeks, because I'm not going to vote for a clean CR. A clean CR means we continue spending the money that is full of woke bullcrap that everyone listening to this program is against. We can't continue to spend at this pace. Look,
for gosh sake, watch your language.
Yeah, there you go, Bill.
What'd I say?
You didn't say anything wrong. That's just Bill being a smart guy. Anyway, go ahead. Bull crap. You continue.
I thought I hit a button or something, right?
No, you're good. You're good.
But I always liken our economy and where we're at as Congress to the Titanic. We're on a course, and there's a collision ahead. We know it. And if we don't correct course, the collision is going to be catastrophic. So doing the same thing over and over again isn't going to work.
One of the reasons that, when you and I were together at the Americans for Prosperity event, I said when I think about Andy Ogles, I think about the quote from Mark Twain that the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. And I feel the rumors of our disagreements were greatly exaggerated because you have focused. And I know that there are others that are focusing on it in the state of Tennessee and beyond, but you focused on this issue of the debt in a way that I think more and more of our elected representatives have to. We whistle past that graveyard every year. We pretend it doesn't, but you look at that hockey stick where, we were $7 trillion in debt, 20 years ago or thereabouts? And now we're $32 trillion in debt. It is unsustainable, and it will be the damnation of the United States of America unless people like you get busy helping us do something about it.
Well, and look, I'm going to be honest with you. I've got good news and bad news. The good news is we can fix it. The bad news is it's going to take time. There's not enough discretionary spending that we can cut to just fix our debt problem. So what we've got to do is we've got to get the regulatory state off of our backs. And that's the EPA, that's the SEC, that's you just name it. What we've seen under this administration is that all of the agencies are targeting businesses and Americans. And we could talk ad nauseum on real life examples of that. And we have to become energy independent again. And so, when you look at inflation, when you look at the prices of commodities, those key ingredients that go into everything, corn, et cetera, like that, all of those prices have gone up because the price of oil and gas, everything moves oil, gas, diesel, right? And so if you're based on your first cost, other than actual just planting the corn in the ground, is higher, everything else is going to be higher, right? And so, not to get into kind of a math discussion, but Biden had his Inflation Reduction Act, which was, had a senior member. There was some vote coming up, and he said, Ogles, I don't know if you should vote yes, whatever it was. You're liable to piss, somebody off. And he said, wait a minute. No, you've already done that. Go ahead. But you had the speaker's fight, right? Where it's like, we've got to change the rules of Congress. And then during the State of the Union, Biden gives a speech on his Inflation Reduction Act and the fact that there was a member of Congress. I had the Inflation Reduction Act of 2023, which undid his Inflation Reduction Act. So I got called out by the president, not by name, but by policy during the State of the Union. And, again, it's just one of those, I'm not up there to make friends. I'm up there to fight and to get things done. And quite frankly, I think my track record speaks for itself.
I'll give you another example of our financial issues and how the Biden administration is exacerbating it. And you well know this, Andy. The amount of money that we're paying per interest on our debt is about to go up tremendously because our interest rates are going up. Our interest rates are going up because the Democrats in Washington, D.C. can't stop spending money, and because they infuse so much more money, the inflation rate goes up. To try to temper the inflation rate, they raise the interest, or the feds raise the interest rate. As the interest rate goes up, a lot of this debt that we have to pay interest on, it rolls over in 12-month increments, and you know this. And we're about to spend, $400 to $500 million more dollars annually just on interest on the debt because of the Biden administration.
Well, and it's a cycle that feeds itself. And the problem that you have now is with Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. So if the government puts more money into the economy, then the economy can produce on its own. The backside risk of that is inflation. And it typically correlates to the size of the stimulus package, right? What you saw during COVID was record amounts of dollars pumped into the economy. And what was surprising, and I'm on the Financial Services Committee that deals with the economy, and in one of the committee meetings, I was asking the Treasury, it's like, you knew that inflation was a downside risk to all this cash infusion. Where's your plan? Like, I want you to present to this committee the scenarios that you laid out on how you might fix it. And he literally said, well, we didn't do that analysis. Hard stop.
Well, why not?
Right. Their job is to literally monitor the economy, the liquidity of our economy. And that wasn't a calculation in their stimulus. And so again, that's the state of our country. And then you talk about the border, and this is an issue that, again, our debt and our border are the two things that will destroy this country.
In a moment, we'll take a quick time out, and in a moment, we'll ask Andy about his call to sanction Chinese officials involved in the fentanyl trade, as well as the illegal immigration problem, amongst other things. It is 20 minutes after the hour.
Other restrictions apply.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN, Matt Murphy, and you. Thank you for being out there. And Congressman Andy Ogles of the 5th Congressional District. I'm glad you got here. You were telling me during the break that flights were, it was kind of touch and go whether you'd be back in town, right?
Yeah, well, I was supposed to be at an event last night that you were at.
That I was there.
And my flight was delayed twice, and then they moved it back up. So there was 3 time changes, and then they moved the gate 7 times. And I've flown enough now. When they start playing ping pong with your flight, it's going to get canceled. And so we went ahead and booked me a morning flight, and then I get this kind of confirmation, you're actually going to be able to fly out of here. But we landed, in fact, James, who works for me, was at the event, and he left to come pick me up, and it was winding down. So I just missed it. I hate that I missed it because John Rich and Dr. Laffer, they're both dear friends of mine.
Art Laffer was incredible last night. John Rich, obviously, always incredible. But yeah, we missed you at the event. So I want to circle back real quick because I don't want to lose the thought on impeachment, because it occurs to me that the best political play is to have Joe Biden on the ticket. And so I'm torn between what's right to do from a criminal standpoint, what's right to do from a political standpoint regarding impeachment, and what might be best for the American people with regard to the 24 election cycle. Because it's pretty obvious if Joe Biden is the best the Democrats have to offer, they don't have a lot to offer, because that poor guy, I feel, if he weren't so ensconced in the deep state, I'd almost feel sorry for him.
Yeah. Well, so the impeachment is a 2-step process. So you have what the House of Representatives issues and votes on the articles of impeachment. Then it goes to the Senate, and they adjudicate it. And so the Senate would not take it up. Even if they did, it would be voted down. And so he's not going to be fully impeached.
He's not going to be convicted.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
And so, but I will also say, and I've made this prediction on national media, that it is becoming clear. In fact, it's been within the last 48 hours, Nancy Pelosi was asked whether or not Biden would be running for president, and she hedged. And I don't think that he'll be the nominee. In the Democrat rules, there's 2 paths. Now, Nevada, to qualify for the deadline is in the middle of October. It's October 15th. So you could see someone make a move before then, or at the convention, the Democratic convention, Joe Biden could come out and basically say, for whatever reason, I've decided not to run, and I endorse this person. At that point, the delegates would be freed to vote their conscience based off of what they think their district or their constituents sent them to do. And so there's a switcheroo that they can do by the order of their bylaws and their convention, that they at any moment they really can switch him out. And his performance is horrible. He literally gets lost in the Rose Garden.
It's bad.
It's bad.
I asked a question about a week or so ago. Is it time for elected officials such as yourself? And I know they did this with Trump, and I don't want to get accused of taking pages out of Democrats' playbook, but in this case, that it seems the 25th Amendment is in play here. Because at what point do you start concerning ourselves with who is actually running the government? Who's running the executive branch of government?
Yeah, it's kind of like with impeachment. First you can lay forward the charge, but then you have to prove it. And so could you have him removed from office? And then if so, what would you get in return? And again, I'll say, full disclosure, impeaching a president in my mind, and I'm a nerd. I love our founding fathers. I often quote John Quincy Adams. It's a serious thing to do. It's not something that you do lightly, but the evidence that's about to be laid before the American people is really disturbing. It's over $20 million that the Biden family has taken. They sold out our country. And if you're a Democrat or an independent.
Come on, Andy. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence.
Only bank records.
That's not evidence.
But it's like, This is a problem. I don't care who you are, Republican, Democrat, and that's why I think they remove him. You've got the gun charge against Hunter. That I think they're going to want to make that go away. The only way they can make that go away is if he's kind of riding off into the sunset. You've got all this stuff with the bank records and whatnot. They've got to do a reset, and he's not the person to do it. Whether it's Newsom, whether it's Michelle Obama, and that's where I would place my wager, is it Michelle Obama.
So they would dismiss Kamala along with Joe, you think? I mean, because she doesn't have the excuse of old age. She just is not ready for prime time.
Joe Biden has some of the worst numbers in history, and her numbers are worse. So you think he's a problem, she's even worse. And their own party don't like her. Why? I mean, I'll hard
so
stop
you
there.
You think Michelle Obama might consider?
All right. So if you look at this
this?
objectively, I have no idea. Like, she has said that she hates Washington, D.C., that she would never want to run for office. But until come on.
If you believe, like many of us believe, that at some that Barack Obama is a part of the circle that is directing what the White House does. That's what you hear, that John Podesta and Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice and others in his orbit are controlling the narrative. And if you believe that, it would make sense that if forced, Michelle might step up to the plate at her husband's urging.
So, not since FDR has a president had a third term, except Obama. Obama's running the country through his puppets. And so if he lets someone else, like a Gavin Newsom or a Gretchen Whitmer or someone else run, they're going to put in their people. And arguably, he would lose that level of influence. So if he wants a fourth term, he's going to have someone very, 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 very close to him, i.e. his wife. She would have immediate grassroots support. She could raise a lot of money. She would be their savior. She'd be doing it for the people.
You have a few more minutes?
Absolutely.
All right, very good. Andy Ogles is with us, Congressman of the 5th Congressional District. It's 1:30. Take a short time out. We'll talk about fentanyl. We'll talk about the southern border, a lot of other issues. If you have any questions for Andy Ogles, get them in on the Super Talk text line, 615-7.
BOSS.com.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Another good segment with Congressman Andy Ogles. It's been a long time coming to have Andy in studio. Happy to have him. You just told me something that I find very interesting, that you've developed something of a relationship with Representative Matt Gaetz. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. He's coming to the state?
Yeah, he flies in tonight, and we're doing an event tomorrow, and we're going to talk impeachment and budget, and obviously I'm sure a motion to vacate will come up. But it's he and I become friends. He was one of the 20, and he's just a good, solid conservative, and because of that, there's safety in numbers. We tend to move together. And, so that's kind of the rest is history.
I mean, does he deserve some of the criticism that he gets for being the burr in the saddle and you're kind of a burr in the saddle too. I mean, do you feel the criticism? You hear the criticism. How do you respond to it when people say, come on, man, just go along to get along?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would argue I won a very contentious primary, because people knew that I wouldn't go along to get along. But I would say the difference between myself and Matt is, he's probably a little more flamboyant, than I am. And so, he probably gets more of the attention, and I'm okay with that. I'm up there to do a job. If I feel that, Tennessee wants me to vote no on something, I'm going to vote no regardless of kind of the consequences, because that's do the right thing for the right reasons and then stand in the gap.
I mean, you don't wear the skinny pants that Matt Gaetz wears. That is for sure.
I hadn't noticed, to be honest with you.
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. Talk to me about you've called for Chinese officials to be some sort of, I guess, sanctioned regarding their involvement in the fentanyl crisis that we see right here in the state of Tennessee, all across the United States of America. It's a scourge. I said in the aftermath of 9/11, I don't want to see one Democrat throw up a meme about never forgetting on 9/11 when the Democrats have done to our southern border what they've done. That's just on the terrorism side of things. And then you add the fentanyl crisis in with it. Talk about that.
Yeah, so, to give you kind of the backdrop of, well, first off, we know it's provable that the Chinese government, the CCP, and I'm talking about the government, not the people of China, right? The CCP are working with the Mexican cartel to move fentanyl into Mexico and into this country. It's provable. It's beyond dispute. Now, I just flew to Tucson during the August break. I went south to the border, and you have sections of that border that the Border Patrol covers, patrols, and then you have sections of it that they don't because it's too dangerous. You actually had a shootout down there a few weeks ago. I went to that section. We went down there. I went down there unannounced. I went down there with some ex-military special forces guys. We had, they had full kits. They were ready to go. And then I just crossed into Mexico. So I think technically I'm an illegal, because I crossed into Mexico. Now I want to describe this for you. Like, you're standing on the border and it's just miles upon, I mean, you can see forever. It's miles and miles of fence, right? And then what you have to realize is about roughly every quarter mile, our government has taken down sections of the fence. And so I literally just walked into Mexico unencumbered. Now I'm in the cartel controlled area, and the guys that were with me, they pop a drone up so they can see the perimeter. They know there was some cartel just over the hill where we were. That's where the shootout was. And so as I walk into Mexico, they come up over the hill. The cartel does. But there was there was a encampment down there. And I climbed down this roughly a 30 foot bluff. I took a video of it. You can see it for yourself. And there's blankets and there's water bottles, and I found birth control where you had a woman who could not pay her full fare in cash. So she had to work it off on her journey. And so they give her the birth control so she doesn't get pregnant. I mean, like, this is how despicable these people are. And while we're there, we had 14 Guatemalans turn themselves into us. And what you have to understand is, because of the Joe Biden administration, if you're wanting to come into this country to work, you just turn yourself in, because they process you and then they just release you. But what had happened is these folks had been dropped on a day that was 115 degrees. They were out of water. One of the women was carrying a toddler, and they were in a cartel controlled area. They would have died. At least some of them would have. And so the guys called it in. Border Patrol comes out with a helicopter first, and they fly around the perimeter so the cartel knows that they're there. And then they sent in vans to pick these people up. But that's the state of the border. And, you talk about this bull crap about they're doing it for the deer. So I went to one of those deer crossings. You know what? I happen to be a bit of a redneck from Tennessee, and I know what deer tracks look like. I walked into Mexico. I didn't find a single deer track. I found footprints. I found carpet shoes that the cartel wear to cover their tracks.
And just to catch everybody up, the excuse is they have to cut portions of the fence, holes in the fence, for deer traffic.
That's right.
Which is garbage.
It's total garbage.
It's just garbage.
And literally, so I was like, okay, this is one of those identified deer crossings. There was not a freaking deer crossing anywhere. There's no deer tracks. And like, literally, there was horse manure in the area. And you know who rides horses in that part of the border?
The drug runners.
The cartel,
right? Yeah.
Right? And so, again, they are blatantly, hey, all the financial stuff, which is just, again, gross and criminal. The border should be an impeachable offense. And so in my articles of impeachment, I laid out that the southern border was an impeachable offense against Biden, because we're being invaded right now. This isn't a migration. This is an invasion, and it's happened under his watch. I mean, we've caught 250 people on the terror watch list. 200, it's actually more than that now, but the last official number that was released publicly was 250 people.
Imagine the gotaways.
Exactly.
Imagine the people that we haven't caught.
Roughly a dozen pulled off 9/11.
Right.
And we've caught 250.
Right.
And those are just the ones we caught.
Let me shift our attention to Ukraine. I find it just disturbing that the taxpayer money going into Ukraine without any level of accountability. I could listen to arguments on both sides. Were there some accountability with this money, and we make sure that we get some sort of validation that our money's going to a good purpose and cause, but there's been none. And the Biden administration seems to, every week or so, just want to roll out more billions of dollars to the Ukrainian cause. Where are you on this?
All right, so I've been clear. I voted against additional funding for Ukraine on multiple occasions. I voted against the cluster bombs, and there's a separate reason for that. But here's what I'll say is any conflict, and I can make an argument for or against the Ukraine conflict. I mean, it's one of those, you can make a good defense in either direction, right? It's a unique conflict. But that being said, you have taxpayer dollars being spent on, quite frankly, someone else's war. So there's three questions that should be asked and articulated and answered, right? Is what's in it for the United States of America? Like, what's our ROI? Is it us directly? Is it for one of our strategic partners? But you have to answer that question. And then what does peace look like? Is there a path to peace? And what might it look like? Again, there's not going to be a perfect answer, but you have to sketch it out. And then thirdly, let's say for whatever reason, you need an exit strategy. What would that look like? Those three questions have not been answered by this administration. And I don't believe in spending another dollar until those three questions are answered to the satisfaction of Congress.
Are you fearful that we are slow walking America into this conflict under the Biden administration?
Well, I think I'll rephrase that to say I think that we are slow walking ourselves into a fight with Russia directly, right? Instead of having this proxy war. And here's the other thing, and I'm going to be honest, and I don't mean to be, by the way, I'm banned by Russia. So there was one news article that said that like I was some proxy for Putin. It's like, give me a break. I mean, they literally
you're on the no-fly list.
There's like 500 people in the country that are banned from Russia because I've been so critical of Putin, but neither here nor there. But it's one of these things of, the only reason why that Russia is a part of the conversation is because they have nuclear weapons. When you look at the size of their economy, they don't matter. When you look at the goods that they produce, they're not important to the United States of America. And quite frankly, they're not a military threat. The existential threat to the United States of America is the CCP. That's it. They're the only ones that can go toe to toe for us. Now, with us, I will say they have developed hypersonic weapons, missiles, as well as China. We don't have those. That's a problem. But that's a conversation for another day, how this administration has let the American people down because we're not keeping up on that particular lane of technology with our adversaries.
There were very few areas during COVID-19 that, gave somewhat of the middle finger to some of these mandates, and Murray County was one of them, and you were mayor of Murray County.
That's right.
We now see this resurgence. I don't know what the chatter is in Washington, D.C., but I don't think the United States of America is going to react very kindly to the idea of government insisting that we do certain things if there is a resurgence of COVID. Is that a chatter that's happening in Washington, D.C. about COVID-19 and what the government should do? And what are you hearing from the citizens of the 5th Congressional District about their reaction to all of this?
Well, first off, 4 words for you. I will not comply. Period. Yep. And there's strength in numbers. Now, the people listening, you have to do what's right for you, but I'm not going to comply with any of this nonsense. Now, what I'll say is I think they floated some of these and started letting it percolate to see how it would do polling-wise. And they've also pulled back from some of those conversations as well, is because, to your point and your analysis, the American people are fed up. And the data afterwards supports that the masks didn't do what they promised they would do. And so, look, if you want to wear a mask, God bless you. I mean, as county mayor, I kept one in my pocket in case someone asked me to wear it because I was in a meeting. I did that out of respect. I didn't believe in it, but I did it. I had a bunch of them in the trunk of my car in case someone said, where do I get a mask? I got one of my, if you want it, I'll get you one. But you have a right to make a choice. And you show me in state law and the state constitution of Tennessee where a county executive or a county mayor has the authority to mandate that you wear a medical device. Show me in the code where they have the authority to mandate that you take a medicine. It doesn't exist, and that's why I refuse to do any of it, because we have HIPAA for a reason. If you want the shot, go get it, then shut up. You have privacy. Keep it that way.
The governor of New Mexico, I don't know if you saw this story. I mean, and I've not seen a public official be rebuked more soundly, roundly, and by so many different. I mean, when Andy Ogles and David Hogg have the same take on the illegality and the unconstitutionality of an executive order, that's saying something. But it feels like a trial balloon. It feels like, I don't know if she was taking marching orders from somewhere else or it was just her own idea. But this concept of, hey, let's just declare an emergency and seize constitutional rights, that's a frightening concept.
Oh, yeah. And as she should have been rebuked. And I expect, I think I can say this, but it wouldn't surprise me if Congress votes on some sort of resolution in regards to this. But all that to be said is, the idea that somehow a state of emergency infringes on your constitutional rights, we saw that during COVID. And this is kind of the next iteration of that. And kudos to anyone and everyone who stands up to fight it. In fact, before I left yesterday, one of the conversations we had in my office was, is there a way to target New Mexico and their federal funding for this type of nonsense? Now, you get into the 10th Amendment, which I'm a big advocate for. But again, it was a conversation we had to send a message to states that, look, we have the 10th Amendment, and I, for one, am going to fight for that. But you also have to respect all of the other amendments.
Yep. Amen. A listener on the super text line is asking, well, one is asking when you're running for president. I'm not going to butter you up like that by throwing
Let me tell you, I am happily married with 3 children. If you want to see my wife file for divorce, that's what would do it.
But one person's asking whether you would be in favor of, and I've heard conversation about this, I think Governor Ron DeSantis mentioned that he would do this as president, militarizing the southern border to try to fight against the cartels, even if that push meant pushing into Mexico to a certain degree.
Absolutely. And there's a constitutional argument to be made that the United States of America and our military has a mandate to protect our country. And so, look, there's been a DMZ in Korea for a very long time. And I think it sends a message, or would send a message to Mexico. Look, we are going to assist you in protecting your side of the border. And once you get your house in order, we'll leave. They can set the timetable. But this idea that, again, pause for a moment. A dozen people pulled off 9/11. We just had the anniversary. The government is admitting, and it's been publicly released, so I'm not saying anything that's top secret, over 250 people on the terror watch list have been caught coming across our southern border. Folks, we got a problem. I don't care where you're at on the issue of immigration and amnesty. I'm a no amnesty guy. That's my opinion. But when it comes to the southern border, and now what you're seeing in New York and Chicago, even the Democrats. In fact, AOC had a town hall or something earlier today, and at the town hall, her constituents were yelling at her to secure and close the border.
Eric Adams is feeling it too.
Oh, sure.
In New York City, broadly. I want to circle back before we have to say goodbye to one thing you said regarding government shutdown. You said it's coming.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me what that time frame looks like and what we can expect, because people freak out about it. I don't freak out. Frankly, I think for the most part, people that work for the government are made whole once the shutdown ends. And so, if they see it coming, they're aware that it's coming, they can prepare for it. And I don't think the average Tennessean notices when the government shut down. As a matter of fact, that might be a pretty good thing. When y'all aren't doing any, saying no is an affirmative act. I like to say that.
That's right.
And when y'all are doing nothing in Washington, D.C., I think it benefits us more than we'd like to believe. So tell me what this is going to look like from a government shutdown.
So we have 2 weeks, and we run out of money September 30th. And so we have to pass some sort of continuing resolution to fund the government. So the continuing resolution itself will be short term. So I'm guessing 30 days, which will give us time to appropriate all of the money. When you go back to the speaker's fight, there's supposed to be 12 separate appropriations bills. So if it's talking about education, it deals with education. If it's talking about Homeland Security, it deals with Homeland Security. If it's the military, it's a military. If it's the Department of Defense, it's the defense. So the first bill that we're going to move next week will be DOD. And that was supposed to be voted on this week, but the votes weren't there because people like me were saying, pause. Let's have a plan on how we move forward. I'm for the defense funding, by the way. It'll be a historic pay raise for our enlisted soldiers, which is long overdue. So kudos for that. But going to the continuing resolution, what will happen with the government shutdown is, I'm guessing, for about a period of 2 weeks. Congress, the government is shut down, but Congress will have to meet. So we'll be up there. Our employees, we can only designate a couple to work. They have to go home. And like you said, they don't get paid, but then they're made whole. So what we have to do in the meantime, anticipating the shutdown, is things like air traffic control and the Coast Guard. We'll do specific pieces of legislation funding them. So all of your essential services that really matter, quite frankly, they keep moving forward. And so might the president, and this is under his purview, might the president close some of the national parks to make a statement of, look what the Republicans are doing? He will. It normally happens, but that's politics. Because he could actually keep them open if he chose to.
You remember when Obama did that, and he was like, they had barricades at the National Mall, and people were walking around the barricades to go to the. I mean, it was a ridiculous dog and pony
The
show.
outdoor venue, like they were literally spending man hours and labor to block outdoor venues.
Right.
I'm not talking.
I remember the World War II memorial.
Right.
There was an honor flight that went to the World War II memorial, and there were barricades that said it's closed. And some of the honor flight people moved the barricades so that they could take the veterans.
I'll go out there and help them move them.
Amen. Listen, this has been a great conversation. It's been far too long coming. Let's do it again very, very soon, Andy. I appreciate you, and I know your constituents appreciate you as well. And by the way, the worst thing I did to you today was to convince you to take a picture with Freddie O'Connell.
You know, he is the mayor of Nashville, or mayor-elect, and I'm the congressman, or one of the congressmen for Nashville, so we'll be working together. It's important that he and I have a relationship. Yes, I'm a hardcore conservative. Yes, I'm quite frankly one of the most conservative members of Congress, but I still represent Nashville, and it's important. So the mayor and I, or the mayor-elect and I, are going to go to lunch, and we're going to talk about some of his priorities and how I in Washington might be able to help the city of Nashville.
Good for you. Good for you. Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate
Absolutely.
you.
Thank
Here's
you.
Andy Ogles. We'll be back in just a moment.